seemed like a simple question, an innocent question almost. We had finished up our Soul Matters group, and there was a small group of us last month for the month of faith. And at the end, kind of when it was coming down, I asked a question because I couldn't not do it. Out of the 5 of us, 3 of them were environmentalists. One an evolutionary scientist, another one who runs her own organic seed company. And finally, the last, someone who is one of the leaders for We Are Seneca Lake, the group trying to block the approved expansion of frack gas and pressurized salt caverns next to drinking water for 100,000 peeps, as he says. Given that crowd, I had to ask. And I said to them, I want to know how you have faith or hope in the environmental movement. How do you have confidence that human beings actually can save the planet? Given these 2 things. One is, human beings really never sacrifice anything until they absolutely have to. And the other thing, that I couldn't think of any movement that had ever been successful except when the problem was immediate and right in front of people, but not when the problem was still somewhat way off. So given that, how do you hold your faith and have hope? And they looked at me, the wet blanket, and took a deep breath. What they said, though, was very instructional and powerful. The evolutionary scientist said, well, you're right. People don't sacrifice mainly because all animals maximize their comfort and avoid discomfort. And we are no different. We only change our behaviors when we have reached some threshold of discomfort. And that's true for a chipmunk or an elephant or a rattlesnake, and for us. Another one said, yeah, that's the rub, right? How do you make humans so uncomfortable it warrants change in our patterns or in our behaviors? And I said, that's the $1 million question. And the scientist said, evolution and species interactions are ultimately about ruthless self-interest and gaining resources. Even mutualistic, symbiotic relationships where both organisms benefit only occur because each one of the species gets something out of it. It's not because they are cooperating. They are using each other. The more resources an individual has, the more progeny produced, the more its genes get passed on to future generations. Fitness, in evolutionary terms, is measured by an individual's genetic contribution to future generations. Oh, I hate that, I said. Are we really that reptilian still? That selfish? What you seem to be implying is only the wealthy and powerful will be potentially those who survive. If we keep on that same trajectory with our same aversion to sacrifice. And he said, yeah, that's true. But in evolutionary terms, we can't really expect too much different. It's why I have changed my tune about fossil fuels, he said. The World Health Organization reported years ago that the number 1 predictor of mortality was poverty. Therefore, those born into money are inherently more fit and have a greater chance of surviving and reproducing. One of the aspects of the report came down to this harsh truth. We are not going to stop using fossil fuels until we either run out of them or until it becomes cheaper to go to alternative energy sources. And we're far from it when gas is $2.59. The report, he said, really makes you look at how people need to be financially uncomfortable. So I said, let's bleed fossil fuels until we run out of them. The reality is our economy is run by people who want to make a profit, and we may not like that, but society has benefited from their self-interest. Oh, come on, I said, really? Human progress is the result of self-interest? Then they all swooped in on me. I swear, it was like a... Blah! Of course, most of the things we honor have moved us forward or made us safer, came from pharmaceuticals, the printing press, sewage, biomedicine, education, medical equipment, surgery, etc., etc., etc. A few were altruistic to start, but for the most part, we benefited from them as humans, while others made money off of us. We need to just give it up and agree that earning a profit on something is a motivating force to many people, and often it serves our greater well-being. I took a deep breath and just thought about that. Another member of the group said, besides the need to get us uncomfortable, there is also this other piece. We Americans are addicted to stuff, lots of stuff. Consuming has become our religion. And it was here where my mind kind of floated back to a movie they had talked about before, but then I remembered what it was all about. It's called The History of Stuff. And in this little 20-minute piece, it talks about how consuming has taken over our psyche, our sense of meaning and purpose, our sense of whether we are of worth or not. It seems actually back in the 1950s, when they were trying to figure out how to be able to boost the economy, this retail analysis kind of guy came in. His name was Victor LeBeau, and he said this: our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and selling and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual, our ego satisfaction in consumption. We need things consumed and burned up, replaced and discarded at an ever-accelerating rate. Basically, he set us on the trajectory that our ultimate purpose wasn't to provide health care or education, safe transportation, sustainability, or justice, but our ultimate purpose was to consume goods. Now, there are many problems with that, not the least of which is that most of the products that we buy in the United States, we buy in 6 months, end up in a landfill. Not 20% of them, not 50% of them, but 99% of them end up in a landfill. As a nation, we've gotten so good at just chucking things. It was about this time, even though that went on a lot faster in my brain than me explaining it to you, I came back to the conversation. Do you know, one of them said, that if the world consumed as much as we do as Americans, it would take between 3 to 5 planets to sustain our level of consumption. And then she said there's a website actually you can go on to and you can put in like how your lifestyle is and how many planets it would take to equal what you were at, right? So I kind of like self-righteously go home later and I get on the website and I'm like, I know I can get it under 3 planets. Absolutely. Right? Take the damn test and I'm at like 4. I took it again. I was at 4. Then I took it one more time. And I'm like skimping on things, kind of getting close. Well, I do that sometimes, not all the time, but the most I could get was 3.5 planets. I was disappointed in myself and in the damn test. So it was about this point, my mind struggling to hold and weave all these pieces together, that I took a deep breath and came back to that question I had originally asked. Given all this, where is the faith and the hope? Well, the activist said, the globe is shrinking, and most of the innovation we've seen isn't in one person's lap. We've got to get over this myth that one person leads a movement or sustains a movement. It is not true that Martin Luther King was the only one who saved the South with African Americans. It is not true that Susan B. Anthony was the only one who made the environment available for women to be able to vote. When people connect, they collaborate and then they create. So yes, collaboration will come from many forms: universities, nonprofits, activists, organizations, organizers. Some will collaborate over their love of learning and research, like things like Wikipedia, a public forum of collaboration. And industry will play a big part. We're a profit-driven culture, so let's just be okay with that. And in the end, whether innovation comes from the profit or non-profit sector, it doesn't really matter as long as it actually happens. It was then that I thanked them for indulging me with their patience and time, and we departed ways. So I head back to Rochester. It takes me about 25 minutes from here to my house. And I thought about two things. One was this. For a number of years, my husband Scott and I were really trying to take our commitment to the earth very seriously. We composted everything. We had chickens to lessen the farm-to-store-to-table problem. We had a car share with a neighbor, so we only needed one car. We cut back on almost all of our meat consumption. We made sure to pull all of our travel into one outing. We bought an electric bike, and we biked up to First Unitarian, which is about 11 miles from where we live, 3 to 4 times a week. We dropped one another off in the village of Pittsford so that we could partly, 3/4 of the way, actually take a bus to get up to church. Our one car was a hybrid Civic that came out the first year that hybrids were available in a 5-person family, and they are tall in my family, that we drove into the ground. And I gotta say, in Pittsford, there's a dairy called the Pittsford Dairy. Anyway, you can go and get milk in glass, which is really awesome. So one time I'm driving, and I had the glass in the back, and of course I turned the corner too fast because I'm in accelerator all the time, and the milk spilled all over the back seat of the car, and the car stunk like skunk for 3 years. I kid you not. My kids complained and whined a lot. I ignored them. The air conditioner went out of that car, and we didn't get it repaired because air conditioning is, well, bad. We eventually traded the car in at 200,000 miles, bent and beat up because it actually croaked. We didn't do it early because then we'd be wasting a perfectly good car, and why get rid of a car due to what it looked like if it still efficiently ran? For 4 years, I bought only secondhand clothes. As a caveat, I bought underwear that was new. We had our house made into an Energy Star house and put German pane, triple pane windows on the entire house, an investment that we will never see come back out of that house again. And it kept us from doing fun things and traveling for a long time. And I want to be clear. I am not sharing that at all to brag, but instead listing it all to talk about my backsliding over the course of the last few years. We've backtracked. Not all at once, but layer by layer by layer. I could blame it on having kids in high school, or busy lives, or needing more conveniences due to busy lives. But when I have that piece of looking into the mirror and being very honest with myself, that's half of it, but it's not all of it. I grew to resent, not everyone, of course, but as I engage with the wider world, I felt like a chump. I resented my sacrifice because everywhere I looked, people were doing one of two things: Either they didn't give a rat's ass about the future of the planet or the future of human existence and drove SUVs and swarmed the malls like flies and then bought new things and threw away new things at lightning speed, which made my efforts seem for naught. I mean, what good was trudging in the snow and waiting for a bus for half an hour really going to matter in the greater scheme of things, especially when it was absorbing all of my free time? The other resent I started to build up, and I'm embarrassed to say this, was against all the people I love and care about who want to do well by the earth and their fellow human beings. People who were environmentalists, but bare bones ones, who drove a hybrid, recycled, and voted for the Green Party every now and then. On that drive back, though, it made me think of a story that the environmental scientist had told. And it was this. He said, I take students that are in a college conservation program to a beautiful place in the Bristol Hills over a ridge with a hemlock forest below it. And I say to all of them, wouldn't this be a wonderful place to build a house with that view? Who would like to have a house here? And everybody raises their hand and looks at me like I'm an idiot. And then I say this to them. A developer is an evil person who wants to build houses in the woods. And they all nod their head at me. An environmentalist is someone who already has a house in the woods. I follow up by saying if we were truly environmentalists, we would make the conscious decision to live in an urban high-rise and leave the forest to the plants and the animals. Imagine their shock. I do this, actually, to point out the complexity. They often come back with a comment about how they know and love the environment and they would be responsible with the land. I then point out that building a house in the woods still puts a footprint on the landscape regardless of their love of the environment. I allude to the arrogance that we all have and the perception that others don't appreciate things in the right way, i.e., our way. The story got to me because I had begun to slide in thinking ill of my friends. Like it was very cut and dry for me, and the complexity piece of it didn't apply to me, only to them. And it was there that I realized something. And I already said this, but it's embarrassing to say that you have resent get in your way. I let my growing resent spiritually disconnect me all the time. Someone in that discussion had said earlier that there are two ways in order to act in the world. One is through acts of love, the other is through acts of fear. And I realized I had spent my life with my hand open in love and trying to be able to connect with everything. And as my resent grew and I got judgmental, my hand started to close in fear and make a fist. I don't like admitting any of that to you. And sometimes I feel like this pulpit is my act of public confession all the time. And I would like more of you up here doing it, not just me. Just saying. But the truth is, I had failed because I had failed myself. But I also failed you. We are here to help heal spiritual disconnection with ourselves and others and the needs of the world. And while somehow I didn't trust that we were in this together, that I wasn't alone. And friends, I'm hoping some of you struggle with that as well. At times. Do you too lose faith? Not face, but do you lose faith that we are all in this together? Do you at times feel only moored to your own values and hopes, not that of a larger community? On some level, I think we all forget that, maybe not as drastically as me, but sometimes we get there too, feeling alone and untethered. The other thing I thought about on the way home is this. I had last spring applied for an entrepreneurial ministry program that was being run by the UUA and the Ministers Association and some generous funders. And it was a competitive program to get into, and I made it in. We have 2 years of intensive work to do with one another. And my project for it was creating a satellite from First Unitarian downtown urban space with the slogan, "Good without God." It's going to be called the Society for Dangerous Ideas, which went well with all the stuff that we had done with Roots and Wings at First Unitarian. Now, part of this program is that we meet with 4 business schools over 2 years for 4 days at a time. And in January, we started with Stanford. It's Stanford, University of Chicago, Duke, and Harvard. And in January, we started with Stanford. And we worked with this professor named Dave Evans. And basically, we learned this way to brainstorm and generate solutions to problems that I had never, ever come across within the artistic world or in the ministry before. But evidently, this is a lot of what they use in Silicon Valley. So you start with accepting the world as it is, not the way that you want it to be. You then list out what you have to accept, whether you like it or not, to move forward with any kind of solution. For churches, here are things that come up, obviously. Millennials aren't church people. They often have never set foot in a church, don't like the word church, and don't even see the need for church. Technology is everywhere. It's how we communicate and connect in the modern world. We are consumers first and foremost. And there's no longer a pool of 1950s housewives who come in and do all the volunteer work. The second thing you have to do is put your bias on the table before you start all of this, so that your bias doesn't subterfuge the entire process. And then you get to start. But if your bias comes up, you get called on it, and you have to work back again against that bias. So mainly on that drive home, actually, I thought about using the model to solve the problem of deteriorating environment in our little Canandaigua universe. What would we have to accept? As in, accept the world as it is, not as how we would want it to be. And well, here are some of those things. Consumerism is the religion of our time. Human beings will not sacrifice their comfort freely. Only by increasing their discomfort will they change. And when we disconnect from one another, we lose our ability to empathize and reason or care about another human's well-being. And finally, we are creatures of rabid self-interest. To survive, to reproduce, to thrive, we will continue to be self-interested. Now, I don't like any of those, but I need to accept them. And then I realized something. At First Unitarian, for a number of years, we've done a pretty good job, actually, of accepting the world as it is when it comes to consumerism is the religion of our time. A number of you know this, but we have a Greater Good project that 8 years ago, we asked our congregants to look at their consumption during Christmas, that Christmas is not your birthday, it's Jesus' birthday. Every now and then I have somebody who it really is their birthday on December 25th. But the point is that we ask everybody to cut back their spending in half, give half to the church for a project for the greater good, and save the other half for themselves. So they're sacrificing themselves, but together. In 8 years, we've given away more than $550,000 to needs greater than our own. One of the other things that we've done of really taking consumerism as the religion of our time, but also saying we're going to buck that together, is starting something like this fashionista frolic that I want to show you. You would love it. It basically is this: we all come together as women with clothes that you buy and they look good in the store, and then you get home and you're like, why did I ever decide to wear that? Any of you have that problem ever? You better be nodding your head. Besides Brandon, right here. Anyway, so we have this event coming up, and we swap, basically, secondhand clothes with each other. And I also realized something else about us, about you here. It struck me how we've done such a good job. You have done such a good job, really, of coming to terms with the conclusion that we are in need of a building that works for us. By accepting how much we have to invest in the environmental design upgrade based not on how we wish the world were. In other words, beaming with money for a new space, a new building, new location, so we can build whatever we want. Instead, you've taken a hard look at what we can raise together, and we're moving forward with accepting the financials as they are, and yet still committing to create the building and community that will both sustain us and hold us for years to come, while inviting others into our loving embrace as well. So, in April, around Earth Day, I would like to facilitate this brainstorming process to help us imagine together a project that is driven by our roots and wings about not only a building that's environmentally friendly, but work that we do around the environment as well. One that accepts the world as it is, not as we would like it to be. I know we can innovate and imagine together, especially in love and gratitude as our guide. So I'm looking forward to that in April. I hope you will all join me for that. In the end, without knowing it, First Unitarian and all of you have been my guide the last couple of weeks. Together, you've reminded me that we need to accept the world as it is, so we don't rail against the wrong thing. But in that acceptance, we also here, with each other, create the world as we want it to be. And you never know. If we do enough of this together, the world may, in some small way, start to follow us instead of us following it. And for that gift, my friends, given without knowing it, but by doing it, you have brought me back to the power of church community. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, mostly for reminding me to live out of my best self, not out of my resentful self. I'm very grateful for that. May it be so. I love you. Amen.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.